Welcome to the deep dive. You, our listener, you often send us some really complex sources, dense PDFs, economic reports, articles just covered in notes about niche market stuff.
Yeah, really involved material.
But today, the target is, well, it's singular and actually quite intriguing because it's so narrow.
Precisely. We're doing almost like a surgical deep dive today, focusing just on the thesis that's right there in the title and subheading of the material you sent, which is excerpts from The Little Habits of the Wealthy.
Yeah, that title alone, it's making a statement. And our mission today isn't even to look at the specific habits listed inside the source.
No.
We're just unpacking the core claim. It's right there in the subheading, the little habits that make rich people different. So we're kind of bypassing all the big financial theory for now and getting straight to the heart of this. Well, this behavioral mechanism, the source claims, is driving wealth.
And it's a fascinating place to start, really, because it just completely reframes the usual debate, doesn't it?
It does.
It sort of ignores all those huge external things we normally link with success, the IPOs, hitting the market just right, maybe family money.
Right, the big headlines.
Exactly. And instead, it insists the fundamental differentiator is internal, it's subtle, and crucially, it's repeatable.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Why the immediate, explicit focus on the word little? That feels, well, it feels counterintuitive, right? If the goal is massive success, huge wealth, wouldn't you expect a title like The Grand Strategies or, I don't know, Monumental Moves?
Well, what's fascinating here is the deliberate psychological angle, I think. Focusing on little, it immediately frames these habits as maybe marginal gains.
Okay.
Actions so small, they're actually easy to just dismiss, or maybe worse, easy to rationalize skipping, because the immediate effect is basically zero. Negligible.
Yeah, that makes sense. A big habit, you notice it,
Yeah.
a little habit.
It hides in plain sight, which means skipping it is just as easy, just as hidden.
And that contrast, that's really key here. Because the standard perception of, building wealth often is about some dramatic event, a massive career jump, maybe one really successful high-stakes investment, or a single, brave, risky venture.
Right. The stuff movies are made about.
Exactly. But the source, just from its title, is suggesting the root success factor isn't that complexity or that risk. It's relentless, quiet consistency.
And if we connect that to the bigger picture, the source is essentially betting everything on the cumulative effect, not just of money compounding, but of compounded effort.
Compounded effort.
Yeah, when we talk about compounding, we usually think interest rates, right? Money making money.
Joke.
But in this context, the little habits seem to compound maybe 3 non-monetary assets, and these are arguably way more valuable in the long run.
Okay, tell us more about that. So beyond just capital, what assets does this kind of consistency build?
Well, first, I'd say compounding knowledge. Think about it. Spending just 15 minutes a day reading about your industry, or personal finance maybe, that's a little habit.
Okay, yeah, seems small.
Right. But over 10 years, that's thousands of hours of specialized knowledge built up. Meanwhile, others might be just, coasting on general surface-level info.
Huge difference. Okay, what's second?
Second would be compounding skill. Practice. Simple practice. Whether it's, negotiating or coding or writing or public speaking, whatever it is, that quiet daily repetition, it compounds into a mastery that you just can't replicate in some weekend crash course.
Right, you can't shortcut deep skill.
Yeah.
And I bet the third one is something people often overlook.
I think so. It's like compounding trust. Or maybe your network. Think about a tiny habit like sending a prompt thank you note. Or just a quick 2-minute check-in call with a contact.
Doesn't feel like wealth building in the moment.
Not at all. It doesn't generate cash today. But over time, doing that consistently builds this really robust network. It builds reciprocal respect. And that can unlock opportunities later that are way bigger than any single investment choice you might make.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. So the source seems to be arguing that these little habits, they're the building blocks for these really deep foundational assets. But that brings up a really important question, doesn't it?
Which is?
Well, if these habits are so simple, so little, why does almost everyone fail to keep them up? Why is there this huge behavioral friction?
Ah, yeah. That's where it gets really interesting, I think. Because you and I know from behavioral science, the human brain is wired for immediate rewards, right?
Absolutely.
It wants the dopamine hit now.
Yeah.
And it avoids anything that feels like Unnecessary mental effort, cognitive load. So these little habits like, say, prepping your budget the night before or setting aside just 10 minutes for focused work instead of diving into email first thing.
Yeah, those offer zero immediate payoff, zero dopamine.
Right. So the real difficulty of the little habit, maybe it isn't the physical effort involved, it's overcoming what they call activation energy.
Exactly. And decision fatigue. A little habit forces you to start a task without seeing an immediate clear benefit. And that just goes against our basic programming.
So the wealthy, then, according to this source's framing, they've somehow mastered systems that let them bypass that friction.
That seems to be the implication. They've automated the small, good decisions. They've turned them into routines so they don't have to spend precious mental energy deciding whether or not to do them every single day.
So the little habit is essentially, it's like a weapon against the brain's natural pull towards, well, laziness and instant gratification.
You could put it that way, yeah.
And that consistency, day after day, that's the real barrier to entry, not needing $1 million to start.
That's basically the entire premise embedded just in the title of the source material, isn't it? The habits get overlooked precisely because they require this long-term view, this willingness to commit to work that feels kind of inconsequential today.
Okay, let's pivot then. Let's look at the second crucial part of the source's claim, that phrase, that make rich people different. The source uses a causative verb there, make. It's very explicit. They don't just say habits that rich people happen to have or habits correlated with wealth. They're claiming these behaviors are the actual engine of differentiation.
Yeah, and that distinction is absolutely paramount because if the source had just implied correlation, well, we could maybe chalk it up to survivorship bias, couldn't we?
How so?
Like, oh, rich people seem to enjoy golf, therefore golf must be a habit of the rich, you know?
Right. Correlation, not causation.
Exactly. But by claiming causation, that the habits make them different, it suggests there's a reproducible blueprint here. It's saying the separation in behavior actually comes before the separation in financial outcomes. The habits are the mechanism.
But hang on. We have to push back a little here, introduce some critical tension.
Yeah.
If these habits are truly so simple and they cause the difference, why isn't everyone just doing them? Doesn't the massive inequality we actually see out there suggest that other more fundamental barriers?
Capital.
Yeah, like starting capital or geography or maybe just sheer luck with market timing. Don't those things still play a huge, maybe even dominant role?
That's a completely fair challenge, and it's one the source material kind of implicitly addresses, I think, by deliberately isolating behavior as the only variable it's choosing to discuss in this title.
Okay, so it's narrowing the focus intentionally.
Right. The source seems to be arguing that while, yes, external factors can definitely speed things up or slow them down, the starting gun for differentiation, that's always behavioral. The idea is if you don't have the right habits in place, then no amount of luck or capital will stop you from eventually, sabotaging your own outcome.
Okay, so the source's framework is basically saying that this behavioral difference it's the necessary condition, maybe, even if it's not always sufficient on its own for wealth.
Exactly. Necessary, but maybe not always sufficient. And this is where we can bring back that idea of behavioral automation.
Ah, okay. Connecting the dots.
Yeah. The idea isn't just that the truly wealthy are doing the little habits, it's that they've integrated them so deeply, automated them so thoroughly, that performing the habit requires almost zero cognitive effort. It's just automatic.
Like brushing your teeth. You don't debate it.
Precisely. And that small mental saving, that tiny bit of freed up brain power, when you multiply that by every day over years, it frees up enormous amounts of executive function.
Which is the mental bandwidth you need for the big stuff.
Exactly. The big, strategic, non-automated decisions, the ones that do drive massive outcomes. That, the source seems to imply, is the actual differentiator being highlighted. The automation of the small stuff frees up capacity for the big stuff.
So then, what does this all mean for you, the listener? If wealth really does stem, at least in part, from these little habits that have been automated, well, it radically lowers the barrier to entry for self-improvement, doesn't it?
It really does.
The investment required isn't some huge capital risk up front.
Yeah.
It's simply, behavioral discipline.
Yeah.
And the ability to just execute on the small things consistently.
So, drawing it all together, synthesizing this, the source material is basically arguing that wealth is fundamentally the result of a deliberate, distinct set of daily operational processes, small routines.
Right.
And the gap we see between the financial outcomes of two different people years down the line, the source suggests it wasn't built on one single gigantic decision,
No.
but on the accumulated quiet weight of thousands and thousands of small decisions made correctly, day after day. And that insight, well, it puts a lot of control directly back into the hands of the individual, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And that's really the power of analyzing just a title and subheading like this. It gives you an actionable framework almost immediately. You don't need, access to Wall Street or an MBA to start implementing a little habit today that maybe avoids decision fatigue or starts compounding your knowledge.
So we've kind of established that the source material, just from its framing, positions wealth as being fundamentally rooted in this collection of small daily habits. And these act as the true separator between different financial outcomes over the long haul. It's the consistency of the little things that ultimately produces the magnitude of the difference.
Okay, so this raises a final, I think, important question for you listening to consider. We've said the habits themselves are little, right? And therefore supposedly accessible to pretty much anyone.
Mm-hmm.
We also noted that our human intuition often demands like a large effort for a large result. So if the difficulty isn't the complexity of the habit itself, then where is the failure point for most people? Why don't more people stick with them?
Yeah, this raises a really important question. If that little habit offers, like we said, zero immediate reward, maybe the true challenge isn't the action itself. Maybe it's the capacity to sustain that behavior even when it feels like it contradicts immediate economic intuition.
So it's a belief issue.
It could be. It takes immense mental fortitude, maybe, to commit to something simple day after day, year after year, especially when the results might remain completely invisible for the first crucial 99% of the journey,
Right. Before the compounding really kicks in visually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the differentiation, therefore, maybe it's not even in the habit itself. Maybe it's in the patience required. And the sheer belief needed to overcome that fundamental human bias we all have against delayed gratification.
So the ultimate challenge isn't really learning what the little habits are. It's sustaining the practice long enough until that compounding effect finally becomes undeniable. Something to think about.
Definitely.
So we really encourage you to take a look at your own current little habits. Ask yourself, are you systematically, even if slowly, compounding your knowledge, your skills, your network and trust? Or are those small daily behaviors maybe slowly contributing to a kind of behavioral debt?
Good questions to ponder.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into, the architecture of differentiation, as presented by our source material today.